3 months after my affair with my boss was exposed, my husband confronted me in the harshest way. I never imagined it would end like this. It's strange how a single decision can destroy everything you hold dear. 3 months ago, my life fell apart in a way I never thought possible. The affair I had with my boss, Greg, wasn't just a whispered office rumor. It became a scandal that upended my entire existence. Yet none of the fallout compared to the devastation I caused Jason, my husband. Jason was the kind of man most women dream of marrying. Patient, supportive, loyal to a fault. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he made me feel safe, loved, and understood, at least in the beginning. Over time, I began taking his kindness for granted. At first, I blamed the slow unraveling of our relationship on life itself. We had been married for 6 years, and the easy intimacy we once shared seemed to fade under the weight of responsibilities. Jason worked long hours, striving to climb the corporate ladder, and I often found myself alone in the evenings, eating dinner in silence or watching TV while he stayed glued to his laptop. I told myself it was normal for things to change after so many years together. But as the months passed, a void began to grow inside me, a gnawing loneliness I couldn't ignore. I craved attention, excitement, and the thrill of being truly seen. That's when Greg entered the picture. Greg wasn't like Jason. He was bold, confident, and charismatic, a man who commanded attention wherever he went. As my boss, he had an air of authority that I initially respected. But what started as innocent admiration quickly evolved into something much darker. It began with small things, lingering glances, compliments that felt a little too personal, and late-night conversations about work that gradually drifted into more intimate territory. Greg had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only person in the room who mattered. At first, I told myself it was harmless. After all, it wasn't unusual for colleagues to develop close friendships. But deep down, I knew better. I knew the fluttering in my chest when he smiled at me wasn't normal. I knew the way I looked forward to his texts had crossed a line. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Greg invited me out for drinks. Jason was working late, as usual, and I convinced myself there was no harm in accepting. We sat in a dimly lit corner of the bar, sharing stories and laughing in a way I hadn't done in years. By the end of the night, I was intoxicated not just from the wine, but from the way Greg looked at me. He leaned in closer, his voice low and intimate, and before I could think, our lips met. That kiss was the beginning of the end. The affair consumed me. Every text, every stolen moment with Greg felt like an adrenaline rush, a secret world where I could escape the monotony of my life with Jason. It wasn't just about the physical connection, though that was intoxicating in its own right. Greg made me feel desirable, alive, and adventurous in a way I hadn't felt since the early days of my marriage. But with every thrilling moment came an overwhelming sense of guilt. Jason didn't deserve this. He was a good man, someone who had stood by me through everything. Yet, I kept lying to him, convincing myself that what he didn't know couldn't hurt him. Our marriage had become a facade. I went through the motions of being a dutiful wife, but my heart was elsewhere. I knew it was wrong, but I justified it by blaming Jason for the distance between us. If only he were more attentive, more affectionate, more like Greg, maybe I wouldn't have strayed. I should have known it wouldn't last. Affairs like ours rarely do. It was a Monday afternoon, a day that started like any other. Jason had the day off, and I had plans to meet Greg at a hotel near the office, a routine we had perfected over the past few months. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing at something Greg had said when the door slammed open. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and jarring, and my heart dropped. Jason stood in the doorway, his face red with anger, his hands clenched into fists. "What the hell is going on, Karen?" he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. Time seemed to freeze. Greg stood up, his face pale, and stammered something incoherent before rushing past Jason and out of the room. I didn't try to stop him. I couldn't move. Jason's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You've been doing this? Behind my back? With him? My boss?" he demanded. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I possibly say? That it wasn't what it looked like? That I didn't mean for it to happen? The truth was, I had no excuse, no justification. "How long?" he asked, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. "How long has this been going on, Karen?" "3 months," I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. Jason's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. But instead, he let out a bitter laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "3 months," he repeated, shaking his head. 3 months of lies. 3 months of betrayal. "Jason, I started, but he cut me off." "Don't," he snapped. "Don't you dare try to explain this to me. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've destroyed?" The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to tell him that I never meant to hurt him, that I was sorry, that I still loved him. But the look in his eyes told me it was too late for apologies. Jason didn't yell or scream after that. He didn't throw things or make a scene. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out at the city below, as if searching for answers. The silence was deafening. Finally, he turned back to me, his expression cold and resolute. "I'm done, Karen," he said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." "I won't." "Please, Jason," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything." He shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You already made your choice," he said, "and now I'm making mine." Jason walked out of the hotel room that day, and just like that, my world crumbled. The weeks that followed were a blur of regret and heartbreak. Jason filed for divorce, and I moved out of our home, unable to face the memories of what we once had. Greg, predictably, distanced himself from me as the scandal unfolded at work. He transferred to another office, leaving me to deal with the fallout alone. The excitement and thrill he once brought to my life now felt hollow and meaningless. I lost everything: my marriage, my stability, my sense of self. And for what? A fleeting affair that left nothing but destruction in its wake. 3 months later, I'm still picking up the pieces. Jason's words haunt me every day. "You already made your choice." He was right. I chose excitement over loyalty, a momentary high over a lifetime of love. I've learned the hard way that some mistakes can't be undone. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. And sometimes, the only way forward is to face the consequences of your actions and try to become a better person. But I'll never stop regretting the day I let Jason down. Because in losing him, I lost the best part of myself. And finally, I pulled a folder from the drawer, thick with text messages, photos, and receipts. I slammed it onto the table, the sound reverberating in the tense silence between us. This is for your company's HR department if you try to contest the divorce. Let's see how they handle two managers using company resources for an affair. Sarah's face drained of color, her defiance evaporating in an instant. She collapsed into the nearest chair, her trembling hands covering her face as tears began to spill. Jack, she choked out, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. I made a mistake. Please, I love you. I let out a bitter laugh, hollow and sharp. Love? The word felt foreign and ridiculous coming from her mouth. I shook my head, the taste of betrayal lingering on my tongue. You call this love? No, Sarah. You don't love me. You love the life I gave you, the stability, the comfort, the image of a perfect life. But you threw it all away for what? A cheap thrill? A few moments of excitement with Mark? Her cries intensified, filling the room with a raw, gut-wrenching sound. She sobbed like someone whose world was collapsing, and maybe it was. But as I stood there, watching her crumble, I felt nothing. Not the anger that had fueled my investigation, not the sadness that had consumed me in the days leading up to this confrontation. Nothing. Just an overwhelming sense of relief. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted off my shoulders. You should have thought about all of this before, I said coldly. My voice felt distant, as if someone else were speaking through me. I grabbed my keys from the counter and headed for the door. I'll be staying at a hotel for the next few days. Movers will come for your things by the end of the week. You need to leave this house. Jack, please, she wailed, her voice thick with desperation. She stumbled out of the chair and clutched at my arm, but I shook her off with a firm, unyielding motion. We can fix this. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just don't give up on us. Some things can't be fixed, Sarah. My tone was final, devoid of even a trace of hope. As I reached the door, I paused, glancing back at her one last time. She stood there, her mascara streaking down her face, her shoulders slumped in defeat. For a brief moment, I almost felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. Oh, and I canceled the credit card for that purse you bought on your work trip. Good luck explaining that. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, but I didn't regret it. She needed to feel the consequences of her actions. Without another word, I walked out, letting the door close behind me. Her muffled cries faded into the background as I made my way to my car. Driving away, I expected to feel the full force of my emotions, rage, heartbreak, maybe even regret. But instead, I felt something unexpected, liberation. The tight knot of tension in my chest was gone, replaced by a strange, calming clarity. It was over. The lies, the deceit, the endless nights spent questioning my worth, it was all over. That night, I checked into a modest hotel on the edge of town. The room was small and nondescript, but it was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I stared at the ceiling for hours, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like a movie. But there was no spiraling, no overthinking, just a steady, unshakable resolve. I had done the right thing. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, half expecting another desperate plea from Sarah. But it wasn't her. It was a message from Mark's wife, Anna. Thank you for telling me. I'm leaving him too. We deserve better. I stared at the text for a long moment, a mixture of emotions swirling within me. Anna and I had only spoken once, a tense and painful conversation where we compared notes and pieced together the timeline of their affair. She had been devastated, but strong. I could tell even then that she wouldn't tolerate Mark's betrayal for long. She was right. We did deserve better. I typed a simple reply. You're welcome. Take care of yourself. As I set the phone down, I felt a sense of camaraderie with this woman I barely knew. We were both casualties of their selfishness, but we were also survivors. And maybe, just maybe, we could build something better from the ashes. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. I met with my lawyer, started drafting the divorce papers, and began the painful process of untangling our lives. Sarah tried to reach out several times, texts, calls, even showing up at my hotel once. But I ignored her. There was nothing left to say. One evening, as I sat in the hotel's small lounge, nursing a glass of whiskey, I overheard a conversation between two strangers at the bar. They were laughing, reminiscing about old times, their voices filled with warmth and familiarity. It reminded me of what Sarah and I used to have, back when our relationship was built on trust and mutual respect. Before the lies. For the first time, I allowed myself to grieve not for Sarah, but for the life we had once shared. It was a necessary step, a way to acknowledge the pain without letting it consume me. Eventually, I moved out of the hotel and into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a fresh start in every sense of the word. I threw myself into my work, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in years, rediscovering hobbies I had long since abandoned. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild. One day, I received another message from Anna. This time, it was a photo of her standing in front of a new house, a wide smile on her face. New beginnings, the caption read. I smiled, genuinely happy for her. Her strength was inspiring, a reminder that life could go on even after the worst kind of betrayal. Months passed, and I started to feel like myself again. I even went on a few dates, testing the waters of a world I hadn't ventured into in years. It was strange, exhilarating, and a little scary, but it was also a reminder that my life wasn't over. Far from it. One evening, as I walked along the waterfront, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, I realized how far I had come. The bitterness that had once consumed me was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. I had learned to let go not just of Sarah, but of the anger and resentment that had threatened to define me. As I watched the waves crash against the shore, I thought about the future, not the one I had planned with Sarah, but the one I was building for myself. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful. Because the end of my marriage wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of something better.